And tonight, Sarah's here by special request because, you know, everyone is trying to figure out what parenting looks like during COVID and what parenting looks like when we're all feeling anxious and we don't know if we're doing enough or too much or too little. I sometimes feel like my life is like the Three Little Bears. Sara is a member of Shomrei. Her three kids are in the JLC. She's a psychotherapist based in Montclair, and she's a senior researcher at Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago. So what I have come to appreciate in my conversations with Sara is how research and data informs your clinical work. I think you said it that way. And so I'll shut up and let you take over because this is your topic. If you guys have questions, put it in the chat if you'd like. And I can't, you know, when Sarah's slides go down, I'll be able to see everyone. But right now, I can't see everyone. So post your questions or hold your questions. Okay, we can now mute everyone, but Sara and me, it's so powerful, Sara. And I turn it over to you.
I know, I could say anything. Shirley, do my slides prevent you from seeing the chat or not?
No, I see the chat, okay. And I see one column of people. So
okay,
go
first. All right. So hi, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces that I haven't seen for a while and to see some people I've never met. Hello. So, you know, Shirley said much of this already. I just wanted to make sure that people had a sense of my professional background and how I come to this topic. Overall, I have about 20 or so years in the child and family services space, whether it's through my clinical work or through the research that I do at the Chapin Hall Center for Children, which is at the University of Chicago. I've been working in this area for a long time, and the thread that runs through all of the work that I do is to understand better the things that really help vulnerable children and families. So whether I'm coming at that from a clinical lens or through a research lens, that's the thing that's sort of been the focus of my professional life for a long time. So that is a little bit about me and why I'm the one talking. So tonight, and thank you for laughing, Shirley, because I have some shtick and I'll need somebody to laugh.
And I'm so that.
Thank you so much. So Shirley and I did have a conversation before tonight's talk, and a few things came up in the conversation that we had. One is just kind of the obvious observation. This is a high anxiety moment for a lot of us right now. It's for parents for whatever number of reasons, and for kids of all ages for any number of reasons. And, you know, that's real, and we're all feeling that. And while there's reason to maybe feel a little hopeful that maybe things are going to start to change, maybe, we're not out of the woods yet. There's still a lot of uncertainty out there. So, you know, this is still a high anxiety moment for all of us. This is not what we had in mind for ourselves or for our kids right now. You know, the dismay that a lot of us have been feeling over the formal close of school as we knew it is now making way for a new dismay over the closing of camp as we knew it. And, you know, we're worried, and we're right to worry, right? You know, another topic that came up when Shirley and I were talking is this idea of the high expectations that parents have of themselves, right? Not just for the concrete things that they're going to do for their kids, but for the kind of parent they want to be, right? How they want to show up in the moment for their kids, how they want to be there for their kids, and really how they want to model the way to be in a high stress moment like this, where it's not just a flashpoint of a stress moment, but it's this long, stretched out, stressful moment. And we all have ideas about how we want to be perceived by our kids as parents in that moment, right? We have an interest in informing how our kids think back on this moment, right? And so ultimately, we all probably want some version of the same thing, right? We want our kids to look back on this moment, and depending on their age, they might remember different parts of it, but We want the overarching memory to be that they were safe and they were loved and they were seen, right? And their experience was acknowledged by their parents, right? Because when kids can stand on that kind of secure emotional foundation, it's from there that they can launch, right? Where they can acquire new skills, they can take on new behaviors that they need to take on in order to be successful in the world, right? And so what we're going to talk about tonight are some sort of practical ways that we can be there for our kids right now so that we can better ensure that when our kids look back on this moment, they remember that they were loved and they were safe and they were seen and that they had the opportunity to learn some new things too, right? Okay, so first, shoring up that emotional foundation. There's three things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about validating children's experience, making the day predictable, and establishing and reestablishing their connection to you throughout the day, right? Those are the three big points we're going to hit. There is definitely more to say, and I probably should have led with that. This topic of parental and child anxiety during a pandemic it's a topic you're not going to cover in an hour, right? So we're going to scratch the surface a little bit. I hope that you walk away with a new trick or two, something that you might try out in the weeks to come. But this will, of course, understandably not be an exhaustive commentary on anxiety during a pandemic, which is, I'm sure, now a field that's emerging. So first, validating your child's experience. So when you validate your child's experience, you're sending them a strong signal, right? You're saying, I see you, I see what you're going through, I respect your experience of this moment, and I get what it might feel like for you, right? It lets you know that you respect your child as a person who's experiencing the world in their own way, right? Validating doesn't mean your kids get to do what they want, right? It's not a free pass. When we're validating a child's experience, we're validating their emotional experience of a moment, not their right to do any action or any behavior that they want to do, right? So there's 4 best practices I want to point out when it comes to validating your child's experience. First, be present without distraction. And let's be clear, we can't give our kids undivided attention all day long on a good day, let alone a COVID-19 day when you're a parent and a teacher and the IT help desk guy for all of the Chromebooks that are floating around your house, and you're the short order cook for the new 24-hour diner that you now run out of your kitchen, right? So you can't be present without distraction. I'm not going to suggest that you do that all day long, but there's a few moments during the day, and they really are moments where I'm going to stress be present without distraction, because I know for the rest of the day, you can't, right? And I'm a working parent. My husband is a working parent. We've got 3 kids who are doing distance learning. We're not present all the time. But when you're trying to validate your child's experience, that's one of those moments where you want to do that. Second, acknowledge without minimizing, right? It's compelling to say something like, this is not a big deal. I promise you, I assure you, this is small. I know it feels big, but it's small. We can only say that because we have the benefit of perspective, right? We've been on the earth longer than our kids. We have the long view. But when you're a child, you only have your view up until that moment, and their experience, regardless of what we know about it, because we have the long view, it's a big deal to them. So we want to acknowledge their emotional experience of a moment without minimizing it, even if that minimizing is with the best of intentions, with the intention to reassure and help them bring down some of the drama that they're feeling, right? Third best practice, reflect their experience back to them. Let them know you really get it. And this is where sensory words can be a big help, right? That you can see how they're feeling, that you can hear how they're feeling, that you can feel what they feel, right? Words like, I know how you feel, I understand what you're going through. Again, well-intentioned. And you might be right. You might really get it from your own experience. But for kids, it can ring a little hollow. But the sensory words, that's where they can pick up, okay, she's getting it or he's getting it, right? Last, normalize the experience, not the behavior. And here's an easy example, right? So there are children out there, adults too, who don't really like the feeling of a seatbelt, right? It feels constricting on their chest. Maybe it hurts their neck. Maybe the fabric feels weird. It makes them feel hot. They don't like it, right? You can normalize their emotional experience of the seatbelt, but you can't let them off the hook of wearing the seatbelt, right? So there's a both and, right? Yes, the seatbelt feels bad. I see that you're struggling. I can hear how upset you are. I can feel that this could feel bad on your skin. You can touch the seatbelt. And we have to wear seatbelts because it's how we stay safe in the car. It's the law. It's what it is, right? And I acknowledge how you feel in the moment about the seatbelt, right? So, I'd love to say that you'll say that and then they'll be like, you know what, Mom, you're right. Seatbelt's on, drama over. Probably not, but it might dial the drama down a little bit because they will have been heard, right? And as John and I were talking before we all joined together, people want to feel heard. They want their point of view acknowledged. Okay, let's move on. So this is about making the world a predictable place, which is important during this time and beyond this time, right? Because when kids have a general sense of what's going to happen next, they can settle better into what's happening right now. They won't be as preoccupied with what's going to happen if they have a general sense of what's going to happen, right? And so I've got a story about this. So when COVID-19 started and distance learning got underway, my husband and I, right away, we made a great schedule, and it was like hour by hour, and it was detailed, and we hung it on the fridge, and we were like, we are so good at this. Look at the schedule, like a Pinterest schedule, right? And I think we followed that schedule for about 0 days because it was completely unrealistic, right? It was way too detailed. It had no wiggle room for the fluctuations of every day that are going to come up because someone's in a mood, or we don't have strawberries, or we have to run to the store, or whatever, right? The schedule was unrealistic. So we had to pull a lot, right? And then play a little bit, iterate a little bit until we found a schedule that was as specific as we could make it while still being flexible enough to manage the day-to-day variations that are going to come up, right? So having a schedule in place, and this is good for now, it's good for later, right? It's good for after COVID, that you can reasonably follow is a good idea. If you've got young kids, great to post it up somewhere so they can see it, right? And better yet, if you've got a child that can maybe help construct part of the schedule, best yet, right? So, parents have to play a role here. It could be something like, we have to do activity X during the day. Should it be before lunch or after lunch? And they can choose. We have to do, this Zoom whatever at some point today. When do you think it fits best in the day for you, right? So giving kids some measure of control over how the day runs within limits, because you may have a job you also have to do, and you may have to structure their time in a particular way to free you up to do your job. But when you're constructing the schedule, this is something that's worked for us, and I think it's generally a thing that works for people. When they have a say in the way things go, they can buy in a little bit better to the way things are going to go, right? Okay, so that's that idea of making the day predictable, giving kids a sense of what's going to happen, and if at all possible, some control over the order in which things are going to happen. The last thing about shoring up the emotional foundation has to do with establishing and reestablishing their connection to you. And this is pretty important, right? So the first bullet here is about creating connection habits, right? There are habits that we can put in place during the day that you can make a part of every day, so that when you have a day where spending more sustained time with your child is hard because the day is pulling everyone in different directions, or you're slammed at work, or whatever's come up, when you don't have more time to spend with each other, you have these touch points that you can rely on, that you can come back to every day. Even if you're not going to get the extra time, you're going to get this baseline time, right? So a good practice here is to focus on the times of day that, where kids feel the most vulnerable. So when are those times? Kids feel the most vulnerable right when they wake up, when they're transitioning from sleep to awake. At the end of the day, when they're transitioning from awake to asleep and their defenses are down and they're tired. And also at critical transitional periods. And for the younger kids, there could be a few of these during the day. As kids get older, there's a little less of them, just in terms of the frequency. But sort of flagging for yourself in advance, these are my connection touch points during the day. Right when they get up, right before they go to bed, and at these critical transitional periods, which prove tricky for some kids. And not all transitional periods are going to prove tricky for all kids, but there are some that do, right? It's often when kids have to shift from something they have been doing that they like into something that they maybe don't like, or vice versa. Sometimes the transition out of a thing that they don't like into the thing they like, they can rush their way out of it, and it can become a little bit messier than it needs to be, right? So the transitional moments, the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, those are some high vulnerability times where a connection touch point can make a really big difference. And these aren't connection hours. It's really a few moments that can go a very long way. The last sort of connection touch point that is great to build into the day, and I'm going to say it and then I'm going to sort of back away from it a little bit, is if you can put in 15 minutes of, again, undistracted, this is another one of those undistracted times with your kid every day, and I'm going to back away from that in just a second, especially for those parents of multiple kids, where the whole purpose of those 15 minutes is just to enjoy your child. There's no teaching happening. There's no expectation. You are giving your child the experience of being enjoyed by you, right? Because who doesn't love that, being the target of somebody's wow, right? I just enjoy being with you. You don't have to bring anything to the table. We don't have to accomplish anything. It's just the fact of us being together. That's enough for me as your parent, right? So now I'm going to back away from that. That can be untenable for a lot of parents. If you're working, if you've got multiple kids, 15 minutes each day with each kid, I know that just adds up to, 30, 45, maybe an hour. And that feels maybe doable, but someone who has a hard time doing that herself, knowing how important it is, it's hard, right? So if you live in a 2-parent household, this could be maybe something that you and your partner divide and conquer with the different kids. And maybe it's not every day, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, each kid gets their 15-minute slice somewhere. Doesn't have to be at one of those vulnerable moments. It can be any time that you guys can make fit. But that connection time, it matters. I mean, it's a big boost for their self-esteem. It tells, still getting used to the AirPods. It tells the kids, I still don't quite understand how they work. It tells the kids that they're important, that they matter to you, and that they are, a creature that, again, can be enjoyed by another person, and they don't have to do anything to get that, right? That connection also serves the purpose of motivating kids to listen to you, to do the things that you want them to do. You can have a great connection with your kid and they can still not listen to you all the time, but that foundation of connection can go a really long way in building up the sort of emotional goodwill between you and your child, so that when you're trying to get them to do a certain thing, they're with you because they know they're with you and you're with them. So let's talk a little bit more about that, about sort of behavior change, because that's another thing that Shirley and I were talking about when we were first talking about doing this talk is, not only how parents can sort of manage the anxiety of the moment in terms of what are they bringing to the table as parents when so much has been taken away and there's so much pressure to be everything for our kids in this moment, right? All of the other roles that were played by other people, we're kind of having to do them all in some way now. And the other thing that Shirley and I talked about is, kids are also having a tricky time with their behavior, right? Some kids are just, they're in that ordinary place where they were going to be anyway, where there's a behavior that they are having a hard time acquiring and they could use a boost. There's other kids who had acquired a set of behaviors and now they've kind of pulled back a little bit and there's been some regressing and you want to try and bring them back to where they were, right? Either way, what a lot of people think of when they think of how to get our kids to acquire new skills and cement in new behaviors is reward charts. So Shirley and I thought we'd spend a little time, or I'd spend a little time talking about what I'm calling Reward Chart 101. So this is just another practical offering for you as you're trying to see your way through this moment with your kids whose behavior, it's justifiably tricky for kids, right? This is a tricky moment for them, but it doesn't mean that we are off the hook in terms of encouraging them to acquire the behaviors we need them to acquire. and that they need to acquire to be successful in the world. So let's talk about reward charts rather. So we love them for a number of reasons, right? They do motivate kids, right? They are a mechanism by which we can help teach kids to be responsible and to hold themselves accountable for the things that they do, right? Reward charts are great because they generally focus on positive reinforcement and not punishment, which we like, which is, what the evidence says is the better way to get the job done when it comes to behavior acquisition. And they work, right? They tend to work, and they tend to work pretty quickly. But we still need to be careful with reward charts because of 3 reasons that I'll highlight here. There's probably others, but let's just talk about these 3. First, if they're overused or misused in some way, they can inadvertently instill a what's in it for me mindset with kids. So if you're somebody who's used lots of reward charts, you might have had the experience of at one time asking your child to do a thing and they say, what will you give me? Because they've learned that there might be a bit of a reward economy in the house that they can leverage, right? So we get that. So you want to be careful of that because, to a certain extent, reward charts do represent an example of a reward economy, but we don't want it to bleed out into sort of the whole of family life and behavior within the context of your home. The second thing that we want to just be careful about when it comes to using reward charts for our kids is that they are better for mundane tasks than they are for encouraging or promoting pro-social behavior. So what's a mundane task? Something like brushing your teeth, putting your personal belongings away, taking care of your backpack after school. Pro-social behavior that's not so great for a reward chart are things like cooperating, sharing, speaking respectfully. There's other ways that we want to try and teach those skills to kids. The reward chart is not the best mechanism for that. The third sort of cautionary tale about reward charts is sometimes kids are not sort of buying into what we're telling them to do because there's a disconnect that's emerged in the relationship, right? This gets back to what we were just talking about establishing and reestablishing your connection with your child. When they feel disconnected, they are less inclined to listen. When they feel connected, they're more inclined to listen. It's not an all or nothing. They won't listen not at all or listen completely. But we want to be careful that we don't accidentally try and use the tool of the reward chart when the tool of sort of reestablishing our connection to our child is really the better tool to use in the moment. It's not always obvious, but it's a thing to keep in the back of your mind. So let's assume that there is a behavior that you want to target for your child, that you've determined the reward chart is the way to go. Let's talk about some best practices in setting up a reward chart for kids. And reward charts are generally good for kids age, it varies when you look at the literature, 3 or 4 to 11 or 12, but, sometimes older kids can get a kick out of a reward chart too. So there's some wiggle room there.
I'm going to do it for my husband, Sarah.
We could talk about doing it for your husband. So anyone who's worked in an organization of any kind might be familiar with this acronym, right? SMART, right? SMART, it's usually about SMART goals, but it's really a great set of rules to keep in mind when you're trying to target a behavior for change and you'd like to use a reward chart to do it, right? So the behavior that you want to target should be specific, not subjective, right? If the behavior you want to change is clean your room is not as strong as put your clean laundry away where it belongs and make your bed, because that is what you mean, right? If you say clean your room, you mean one thing. They might take that to mean something else, right? So be specific. Don't let it be subjective. For measurable, the M, we want to see and agree. You want to make sure that the behavior that you're targeting is something that can be observed, right? You can see laundry put away. You can see that a bed has been made. You want to take out any room for debate. If the thing that you're trying to get your child to do is something where you're going to argue with each other a little bit each day about whether or not it's done, go back and see if you can make the target behavior more specific, because if it's specific, it should be measurable, right? So for attainable, there's 2 things that we mean here. One is, what I have here is that it should be realistic, not aspirational. So we want to be realistic in terms of children's development and just, sort of concrete things that will make something possible or not possible, right? So children, especially in their younger years, they develop at different paces. You may have friends whose child is doing X, Y, or Z thing already, and your child is not. It might not be because your child really needs a reward chart kick in the pants. They just might not developmentally be at that place, right? And they'll get there. They're just not there yet. Other times you have a clear sense as a parent, no, this is a thing that my child can do and they're not doing. And I think we need to bring a different kind of motivator into the conversation, and a reward chart would help us do that. So you want to make sure that the target for the behavior change is realistic in that way, but also that it's a thing they could technically do. So if one of the behavior changes is put the dishes away, if your child can't reach the cabinet, that might not be an attainable target of behavior change for them, right? Unless you get a stool and then you do make it attainable, right? So for relevant, it needs to matter, not just to you, but to them. Because if it doesn't matter at all to them, if they've got no skin in that game, it's going to be hard for them to attach, right? Oftentimes, kids don't realize they actually care about a thing. We can try and frame the behavior that we're looking to encourage in a way that does help them see, oh no, you do have skin in this game. For example, my kids like to leave their power supplies plugged into random outlets, and then they just string out into the floor. I don't like that. I trip over it, and the dog trips over it, and then they forget where they put their power supply, and then the next day their laptop is out of juice, and they don't know where their power supply is, and on it goes. So it matters to me that the power supply gets put away, because I like my house to be tidy. And I also know that if they don't know where their power supply is the next day, we're going to get off on the wrong foot. And so it matters to them too, because they don't want to get off on the wrong foot the next day. They do need their computer to charge. So it matters to me and it matters to them. So we want to frame the target of behavior change in a way that helps kids see that it's important for them too. That's not always simple to do, but it's often possible to do. And lastly, the target of behavior change should be time bound, right? It should have the opportunity to succeed, and pretty quickly too. So if you find that your child needs a lot of points or stickers or stars on their chart in order to attain the reward that they're going to attain once they're successful, and we'll talk about rewards in just a second, two things might be going on. One, it might be a target that's a little out of reach, like a little too hard, right? You might want to adjust the expectation, or it might be too high value a reward, right? So if you're like, if you want to earn your very own iPad, you need to earn 200 stickers. It's a lot of stickers, and it's a high value, that's a high value reward. You might want to adjust that a little bit, right? So, ideally they can earn a reward within a week or two, right? They can see the fruits of their labor fast, right? That's motivating for kids. When they see that they can be successful at a thing, they're more likely to do the thing. So rewards that are really great are things like experiences, if you can do those, right? So if you're a dessert family, you get to choose dessert, right? For younger kids, this could have some valence. If you're a movie night family, you get to choose the movie night movie that we watch, right? And in my family, that has some valence. So you want to be a little thoughtful about the reward. If you feel like it has to be something that's attached to a monetary value, maybe keep it on the smaller side, at least to start, right? And see what you can do for under $10 or $15, right? Because the higher ticket item it is, the more you're going to make them work for it, and the longer it's going to take them to succeed, and the more likely they're just going to bow out because it's too hard, because they're not seeing success soon enough. All right, so let's use an example, and then I'm going to check in with Shirley and see what's going on in the chat.
Yep, and then we should open up for questions, because
this is it.
Good.
This is the end of it. So keeping schoolwork organized. So make it specific, right? And this is something that matters for a lot of us. We all have kids who are doing some kind of school, right? Maybe you have a spouse that's doing their work in the dining room, and they used to do it in an office in the city. You can apply this really in many ways, but let's talk about kids and keeping schoolwork organized, right? What does that mean, right? Organized to me is one thing, organized to them is another thing. So you want to spell it out, right? Books and folders in a backpack or other designated place, laptop and charging supply put away, right? Make it very clear what you mean. It has to be measurable, right? So you need to be able to see that the school-related things are put where you said they should go, and the computer is where the computer needs to be. And you can see that it's unambiguous. There's no room for debate. right? It's attainable, right? Your child understands what you're asking them to do. It's a thing they can do developmentally, and they know what you mean. They have a place to put their things. They know where that place is, and it's a place where their things can actually fit, right? It's relevant. It's relevant because it's stressful for children when they don't know where their school things are and they need them, right? We've all had the moment where there's, a freak out at some point during the school day, whether it's after school when it used to be normal school back in the day, or now when children have to take a photo of an assignment that they did and they don't know where the assignment is. It's stressful, right? So if we have a designated place for our things, we're taking some of that stress out, right? And it's time bound. You can imagine a world where you can say to your child, if you can keep your schoolwork organized for 4 out of the 5 days of the week, you get your reward, right? You're giving them a day to just, not get it. But if you're a family that's used to schoolwork being disorganized and all over the place 5 out of 5 days a week, if you only have that experience 1 out of 5 days of the week, everybody wins, right? So that's an example of something that they can do where they can see the fruits of their labor by the end of that first week if they, almost hit it out of the park. So that's basically the long and the short of the content. Shirley, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so let's do this. Sarah, can you take down the slides, or
I sure can. Yeah.
I can get all the people on
How's
my.
that?
Oh, good. So
Awesome.
I see lots of folks now, and so I want to open it up for questions. And I'm wondering how this resonates for people with the younger kids, the younger crowd, which started all of this. Any thoughts? It's funny, as I listened to you, Sarah, what I was seeing is we do the same thing with leaders when we talk about SMART goals and structure. And so we've been talking a lot about this during COVID. How do you structure your life when you're not going to work? So let me see if anybody else has experiences. I don't see questions, so I'm gonna unmute yourself if you have a question. If I don't see you,
I don't have a question, but well, first of all, Sarah, I feel like embarrassed because I know you. I really didn't realize I know you until you said. I was like, oh my God, you have twins in JLC, of course. And also your presentation made me realize that I'm doing a little bit better than I probably thought I was. My husband says, like, I see my mistakes a lot more and I think about them a lot more. And so this does make me feel like, okay, like I'm not the loser parent,
No.
because like he hears me cursing a lot. And that's my vent, right? Like I can't lose my mind when I'm stressed out, so I curse. And but then when you said like emotional connection, and you said like the reward chart, and I was like, oh yeah, I do a version of this, or I do a little bit of that. And so maybe minimizing my thoughts about my mistakes, like cursing or being upset in front of him about something, wasn't as bad, or at least it's being balanced or mitigated with some goodness. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so I just want to really thank you for that, because it's hard.
It is hard.
I think what you're saying, Naz, and I think this probably plays true for all of us, whether we've got kids at home or spouses or we're alone, giving ourselves a break and accepting that we're probably doing a lot better than we think. Sarah and I spent a lot of time talking about what it meant to be doing good enough just to get through the ache of what this existence is, and giving yourself some space to say, okay, not bad. It's good enough. Got through today. Check.
I recently read something related to the good enough, this idea of good enough parenting, which, has roots in, hold on. parents sharing their own anxiety. I'm sorry, I just got distracted by the chat, which I don't have to, because Shirley's
I'm taking care of that.
So to your point, Naz, so this idea of good enough parenting, it started with a guy by the name of Winnicott who talked about the good enough mother. And then there was someone with the last name Bettelheim who wrote a book in the late 1980s about good enough parenting. So it took Winnicott's ideas about good enough mothering and expanded it to both genders, right? And made a bunch of really good points. But the thing that I just read about this idea of good enough parenting was that if Goldilocks could choose, she wouldn't choose the parent that did nothing. And she wouldn't choose the parent that did everything. She'd choose the parent that was just good enough, right? Who was imperfect, and so that was normalized, but who tried really hard and that was modeled, who made mistakes and showed that you can come back from them, right? Who was human. So you can give yourself a pat on the back.
So, Sarah, I have two questions that I think are a little related. One is from, I think I can use your name, Lindsay, if that's okay. I don't see your camera, but she has two, a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And the question is, how much leeway to give them understanding that life is turned upside down while still maintaining clarity on what the expectations are. So, I'm going to give you a question because it's really a little crazy, but we still have our lives to live in a way that is steady and stable, right?
Yeah.
Hold that thought, because the rabbi asked a little bit about how do parents share their own anxieties, fears, and whatnot with the kids. So let's put that together, Sarah.
Okay.
Where's the leeway and where's the expectation that we keep a sense of norm? And how do I let you know that I'm worried too?
So I'm going to speak to the first one first, right? So, as to the, where's that sweet spot between keeping some structures in place and allowing for some wiggle because things are upside down right now. I think you have to sort of, if you're a single parent, this is sort of like more of an internal process. You could do it with friends, you could do it with other loved ones. If you've got a partner in the home, a conversation between you and the partner, but you need to establish some of your non-negotiables. And that list might be kind of small, right? There are some things that we're not going to wiggle on, right? And then there's going to be some other things that are our sort of values that we hold, and we strive for that. And we're going to be a little flexible in those things, right? And then other things, are just different now, like screen time. We know that's different now, right? School is screen time, and then kids want to have screen time because they feel like they didn't have it, which they just did. But at least I guess you're hearing my experience at home. But when it comes to the young kids, 5 and 2.5, they are little. The number of non-negotiables might be kind of small for them, right? There might be a short list of things like, these are not the things that we're going to wiggle on because these things matter to us so much as a family. And then there's other places where you've got to bend because that's just what life calls for right now. And that's a great thing to model too, the ability to bend with the times and to say, this is hard right now, and we are going to be doing some things as a family that we don't normally do. But this is not what time normally looks like for us, right? And that kind of gets to what the rabbi is talking about. I think that you share your anxieties and your fears in ways that are age appropriate, right? So, we don't want to scare our kids, right? They need to have a sense of mom and dad got this, right? But you can say, I don't like how it feels not knowing what the future brings too, right? It's kind of validating their experience of the world by sharing your experience of the world right along with them, right? I am really upset that sleepaway camp was canceled for you too, and here's why, right? Or, I worry about grandma and papa too. They're older, and we're hearing a lot of scary things about how this virus affects older people. And here's some of the things that grandma and papa are doing to protect themselves and keep themselves safe so that we can all be together in a way that feels good to us again. So I think it's letting them know that you have some anxieties and worries too, and how you're managing them, right? so that you can model that for them too. I feel scared sometimes too. And when I feel scared about this, I like to, and then you can tell them what you like to do, whether it's, remind myself of all of the safety that's out there around us. Even with all of the danger signs, there's safety, right? We're taking care of ourselves. We're practicing social distancing. We wear a mask when we go outside or when we're in a public space that's indoors. We're taking all of these different precautions. We wash our hands 100 times a day, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, making clear to your kids, yes, there's danger out there. And yes, we're protecting ourselves. We're protecting you. It's okay to feel scared. I feel scared. This is what I do when I feel scared. So I think it's healthy for kids to see that their parents have a full range of emotions, but we want to make sure that we tailor the picture so that it's, right for their age, right? With the much, much older kids, the kids who are maybe home from college, they have more bandwidth to sort of see you as the complete human that you are. For the younger kids, you are not quite a complete human, right? You're a little unidimensional. You're mom, and mom looks a certain way, or dad looks a certain way. So you have to respect that a little bit. But it really is age specific. So I appreciate saying that they're 5 and 2.5, because their bandwidth for seeing your anxiety is going to be a little smaller, or a lot smaller, frankly, than a college age kid who's home. So again, sharing with them your feelings, good, but follow that up with, and here's how I'm managing, because that's what they need to know, right? I feel worried. What do I do? So you can tell them, when I feel worried, this is what I do. And maybe there are things you can practice doing together.
So staying with the older kid there for a minute, because we just got
Sure.
another question that is about different standards. And this is so true when you're dealing with teens, because teens are, they move in hordes, right? And so if the teens, and I see this, are sitting together and watch on Plaza, and they're pretty good, they're separated.
Yeah.
But if in my household, we can't have you do that because of needs in our household, how do you deal with the anger that the child feels when they cannot share in what their peers are doing?
And the disappointment and the sadness. It's just
The disappointment and sadness, yeah.
I mean, I think the first thing you do is validate their emotional experience, right? It's not, I understand how you feel, but I would feel lonely if I were you, right? I would feel sad and disconnected, and this is unfair. And at your age, this shouldn't be what you're doing.
Right.
And use those sensory words, what you hear them saying, what you can imagine they feel, right? Not I know how you feel, but I can imagine you feel, and let them know what you imagine they feel, so that they have the sense that you're not, marginalizing what they're saying or making light of it or thinking that it's small or minimizing it in any way. Fully acknowledge it. It is as big a deal as they say it is, because it's their experience right now. And again, they don't have the long view. They have this moment, right? This is the moment they know. This is the moment that's consuming them. I think you validate their emotional experience, and you tell them the limits of what you can tolerate and why, right? So for the older kids, having the reason why is important. You can tell them, me or your dad has an underlying condition. We have to be extra careful, or we need to be able to see grandma and papa in a couple of weeks. So that means we have to be extra careful now about who we're exposing ourselves to. And that frustrates you. And it's not fair to you because you want this. And I would want that if I were you. But here's our constraints. And so maybe you join with them in trying to come up with something that makes them feel a little less isolated and disconnected, but still makes you and your family feel protected, right? Maybe there's a brainstorming you can do together. How can we solve this problem? Since you need things, and those are legitimate things to need, and we need things, and those are legitimate things to need, and they seem to conflict, we have to figure out a way that we can compromise, which means we're both going to get a little something, but we're not going to get all of something, right? So I think that's the tack I would start with the teens. And I have a 14-year-old, so I get that conversation. It's not easy, and they're right. right? They are right to feel the things they feel.
Yeah.
They need to hear that you know that, I think, first and foremost. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. It does. It's hard, but yeah.
Yeah. It's easy for me to say. I mean, we're on a Google Meet and I'm like, do this. But
Yeah.
I think that's where I would start, because I think if they feel acknowledged and they don't walk away with this sensation of she's not listening, she doesn't understand, she doesn't get it, she thinks she gets it, but she doesn't get it, she's never been this age during a pandemic. If they walk away feeling, okay, she hears me, like she's trying, right? She's trying to see me and hear me and feel what I'm feeling and meet me somewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck.
So
Thanks.
I'm curious, you said something, and I'm just curious about people's experiences. You said that there are non-negotiables, and then there's got to be latitude.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure that out even for myself. So I'm curious what people's non-negotiables and latitude. I mean, so my latitude is I don't feel like I can wear the same thing a couple of days in a row. I know the hell with it, right? But there are certain non-negotiables. How are you guys coping with that in your own lives, with your kids or partners, or what's non-negotiable? Where's the latitude as we work through the rules of COVID-19?
That's a good question.
I think for Brian, he understood that a non-negotiable is we can't get very close to other people. And he fully agreed. And so when we went out for walks or bike riding, I just kept telling him, reminding him, keep it moving. Like, you see people, wave hi, keep it moving. This is not a time to get into a conversation. You want to talk to them on Messenger. That's how you're going to talk to them. And he totally agreed, and he was wearing the mask, the whole thing. But it went right down the tubes when he saw the ice cream truck. The ice cream truck came right in front of our house, and like a million children flocked to it with all these adults. No one was wearing a mask. Everyone's buying ice cream like it's not a problem. And he just experienced like great loss and just confusion.
Yeah.
And it just was like a lot of crying. And that's an example of a non-negotiable. Right. Everyone is eating ice cream except you, or what it feels like everyone, right? It's not everyone, but this is a non-negotiable. So we're going to go in the house and we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to buy you like a crap load of ice cream for the house. But the problem was that when I tried to order ice cream to get delivered, like nothing was coming. It was horrible. But yeah, so that's an example.
Oh, that is interesting. Every time I hear the ice cream truck, I want to close off the block because I know it's disastrous for the kids on the block. Yeah. It's like, who let them out?
I'll give an example from my own life about this. What's non-negotiable? Where's their bend? Non-negotiable, we eat dinner at the dinner table together. Non-negotiable. Now, I used to say things like we eat other meals when we're home at the table, whether not together, but like we eat at that place. Now it's negotiable, right? If people need some space during breakfast and lunch and they need to eat, someone at the island, someone at the table, someone in the living, fine. Go where you need to go. Dinner time, we're sitting together at the dinner table. Other meals, Godspeed. Find your place.
Find a corner. That's
right.
Funny.
Go where you have to go. So, that's one example of, where we've realized we're going to let this one go. And when we turn the corner on this experience, I can imagine a world where we're eating meals at the table again. But for now, just dinner.
I worry about that a little bit. When we open the doors again and everybody comes out only wearing pajamas or something.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming to the very end. Any last comments from somebody we haven't heard from? just unmute yourself and say your piece. If not, I can't see everybody, so you're going to have to unmute and speak. And I don't see anything. Okay. So let me first, Sara, this was wonderful. And I want to say thank you so much. Yes, I just got one comment here that says, see, you don't see these, but somebody just said, Miriam just said, this was amazing.
Thank you,
this
Miriam.
was really wonderful. And what we can do is take your slides and we can put them in Shomrei Week, and then so people can go listen to this. So if you send those to John, because they can listen to this on their own if this time didn't work out for one reason or another.
That's right. And if anybody just wants a copy of the slides to have, let me know. I'm happy to share them.
Sarah's in the journal, so you can find her email address there. So
I'm in the book.
Whole thing's recorded.
And it's recorded, right? And so people can go listen to it at another time. The other thing that I just want to say is that next week in some ways is a very important conversation about non-negotiables. And I want to make a pitch for this. Todd Wieseneck, who is, again, a very long time Shomrei member and an old friend, is going to talk about the legal things we should be thinking about. Todd actually scared the shit out of me because, David and I have our will. I mean, we're old. We have our wills. We have all the power of attorney and all that stuff. And Todd said, do you have medical directives for your adult children? I said, my children? And he said, yeah. And so you have to think about lots of things. And while it is not like putting together a chart, a reward chart, there are lots of things to think about. And I don't know about you guys, but I had my babies and I didn't have all my stuff in order. It took me time to get older to remember I have to put things in order to protect my children. Now I have to think about it in different ways. I took care of my mother, but I didn't take care of other things. So these are some of the non-negotiable things that we as adults should think about. And it's unfortunate that we think of, we get reminded because it's COVID, but that's a silver lining of COVID that says it reminds us to do what we should be doing anyway. So
Shirley, may I interrupt? This is Carol, having
I know,
done this and you heard me. But it's also important, you think of doing wills and healthcare directives and power of attorney when you're older. It is important for young people to do it, especially if they have children, so that they can put in their will who they want to raise the children. So it's important, and have everything in order so that if, God forbid, something happens to them as with young children, they have made provisions. Sorry to interrupt.
Don't steal Todd's thunder, but yes. Yes. So as I said, Todd is not just talking to older people. So I invite you to be nourished. As Naz said in her comment, you should look at the chat notes, Sarah, because there are lots of thank yous coming in. We hope we can nourish you and connect with you again next week, Tuesday, 7:30 at Nourish at home.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you both. Well done. Fabulous.
Thank you,
Bye,
Sarah.
all. Good to see everybody.
How do I end this thing? You took me in charge. I'm like, I just want to listen.
Where is John? He's supposed to be the one ending it.
I'm going to go join them. All right. Goodbye, Shirley.
Bye.
Nice job. All right. I'm just going to close this. Hopefully it'll stop.
Yeah.
Let's see.